Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's Weekly Forex Forecast for the 27th of July to the 31st of July 2020. As always, we're going to start off by looking at the US dollar index and crude oil before running through a number of markets, looking at the key levels of support and resistance in the process. And we're also going to be highlighting some of the targets that we're going to be looking for in this coming week and also for the weeks ahead. So I hope you're having a nice weekend. Let's jump over to the charts and see where the money is this week. As always, we're going to start off by looking at the US dollar index. Now, last week we were looking for further declines to the downside in this market. We did go into last week with a bearish bias on the dollar index, preferencing dollar week setups last week. We did have a really nice sell-off, and in fact, this was a major reversal to the downside, this sell-off last week in the US dollar. And we took out both targets to the downside set from last week at the 95.16 and also at the 94.65. And we pretty much finished the week right at the second targets right here in the US dollar index. So very simply put, going into this week, we are looking for further declines to the downside. We do go into this week with a bearish bias on the dollar index once again. What we would like to see is, because we're coming quite close to the 93.83, we need to see a pullback first, especially if this is quite extended. So any correction in this area going into this week is going to be viewed as an opportunity to start to look once again for a sell-off in the dollar index. And we're going to be looking down towards the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 93.83. So we will not be trading the dollar index going into next week, but using this as a guide for the dollar pairs, which we will be running through now, we are going to favor dollar week positions in the dollar pairs going into next week once again. So the next market we're going to look at is crude oil. Now, last week we started the week down in this area here, and we were looking in last week's video for a move into the 41.52 level, and you can see we did have a really nice rally into the 41.52 level, which was right here. We peaked just above it and we started to hold under this, and we pretty much moved sideways for the rest of the week underneath the 41.52. Very simply put, going into this week, the uptrend in oil is still intact, and oil is benefiting from a weaker dollar from that reflationary scenario. So very simply put, this is now a great opportunity going into next week to start to look once again for bullish setups in this market. And if we get the right kind of setups in this market, if we can start to see some bullish breakouts to the upside here, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 43.69. So the next market we're going to look at is euro dollar. In last week's video, we were looking for further advances to the upside, and actually myself and some of our members are positioned into this from about roughly the 1455 level. And this actually constitutes a major breakout to the upside in euro dollar, this rally to the upside last week, just as we had a major reversal to the downside in the dollar index. So very simply put, going to this week, we do only favor long positions in euro dollar, and any pullback in this area, and it's unlikely we're going to come all the way back to previous broken resistance turning support. So any pullback in this area is simply going to be viewed this week as an opportunity to start to look for bullish setups. And we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.1718. So the next market we're going to look at is pound dollar. Now, last week we had a really nice move in pound dollar. We started the week right here in this area, and we highlighted in last week's video we were looking for a rally to the upside to the 1.2799, which was right here. So we had a fantastic move right into the target set from last week. Very simply put, going into this week, we are still only focused on bullish setups in this market. So any pullback in this area this week is going to be viewed as an opportunity once again to start to look for bullish setups in this market. And we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.2900. So the next market we're going to look at is US dollar Japanese yen. Now, last week we had a bearish bias on the US dollar, and the US dollar yen actually reversed to the downside because of that weakness in the dollar. And this sets us up very nicely for this week. We have very strong momentum sell off to the downside. We should be seeing lower lows in this market, and possibly all the way down to the 104.62, which is our next key target to the downside. So any pullback in this market this week into this area is going to be viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bearish setups. And we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set with the 104.62. So the next market we're going to look at is Aussie dollar. Now, last week we were looking for further advances to the upside in this market. We started the week here and we were looking for a rally into the targets of the 0.7062 and the 0.7132. And we did actually take out both targets to the upside, and we started to pull back towards the end of the week, which was nice. So very simply put, going into this week, this pullback is going to be viewed by us only as an opportunity to start to look for bullish setups in this market. And we're going to be looking, once again, at initiating longs up towards the next key area of resistance, the upside and the target set, with 0.7203. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key area of resistance, the upside and target 2, at the 0.7290. So the next market we're going to look at is New Zealand dollar. Now last week we started the week down in this area here, and we said in last week's video we were looking for a rally into the 0.6643, which was right about here. So we did have a really nice rally into that key area of resistance, and we kind of chopped over it, and then we slightly pulled back at this key area of resistance last week. So very simply put, going into this week, we are once again only focused on bullish setups in this market, especially with that major reversal in the dollar index. Any pullback in this area is simply going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to once again start to look for bullish setups. And we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key area of resistance, the upside and the target set, at the 0.6756. So the next market we're going to look at is US dollar Swiss franc. Now last week we started the week in this area, and we were looking for further declines to the downside, and we did have a really nice sell-off into the key area of support and the target highlighted from last week at the 0.9319. Now we've taken out that key area of support to the downside. We are still only focused on bearish setups at the moment in US dollar Swiss franc. And there has also been a major reversal in the US dollar Swiss franc to the downside, as there has been with euro dollar to the upside and dollar index to the downside. And this is off of the back of the reflation, the stimulus being pumped into the markets from the Federal Reserve. So very simply put, going into next week, we are focused on bearish setups in this market. We're coming quite close now to the next key of support to the downside. So as always, we need to see a pullback to start to give us good risk to reward setups in this pair. But any pullback in this area, and again, because of the size of the sell-off, it's unlikely we come all the way back up to broken support from the past, turning resistance here. So any pullback in this area towards the 0.9320, let's say, is going to be viewed as an opportunity next week to start to look for bearish setups and bearish breakouts. And if we get the right kind of setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, at the 0.9153. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and target 2, at the 0.9072. So the next market we're going to look at is US dollar CAD. Now last week we had a break to the downside in this market after that kind of whipsawy range, and this was because of that major break to the downside in the dollar index. So very simply put, going into this week we are focused on bearish setups in this market. We're starting to pull back already, so any further pullback in this market is going to be viewed as a shorting opportunity going into next week. And if we get the right kind of setups in this market, we start to correct and break to the downside, we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.3279. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and target 2 at the 1.3203. And last but not least, we have gold. Now last week we were looking for further advances to the upside in this market, and we took out both targets to the upside at the 1827.12 and also the 1863.23, which was right here. And we had a really explosive move to the upside, and this is again off of the back of the devaluation of the dollar. We are only focused in this market next week on bullish setups, and any pullback in this market, and we are actually coming up to, at least on this chart, all-time highs on this chart. And a lot of people, in my experience, for some reason seem to think all-time highs are a place to sell. They're not. This should actually be viewed as a continuation. This should be viewed as something to go long, given the opportunity to enter. So any pullback going into next week is going to be viewed simply as an opportunity in this market to start to look for bullish setups. And we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set, at the 1920.34. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the second key of resistance, the upside and target 2, at the 1938.06. So that is it from me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far. I want to wish you all a fantastic weekend, and I want to wish you all the best in your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care, and don't forget to trade safely.